Hi, I'm John Hodgson. Welcome to episode 4 of the Teesside Band Archive Local Heroes podcast. If you're a Teesside-based band or musician and would like to appear on a future podcast, please email me at tba1@gmx.com. That's tba1@gmx.com. Tonight's guest is Steve Cook. Steve was born near Wolverhampton in 1967 and began experimenting with sounds and music creation aged 13 using knitting needles and upturned biscuit tins. This heralded a long period of musical development which at some stages involved short-lived bands, but more often than not Steve found that making music by himself was more rewarding. After suffering one too many unreliable fellow band members who didn't share Steve's commitment and occasionally the dreaded musical differences, he left bands behind. Steve nowadays concentrates not only on writing and recording himself, but also taking his one-man band on the road with a keytar slung around his neck, allowing him to strike the guitar hero poses we all know and love. Steve Cook, welcome.
Thanks, John.
Hi, right, okay, well, we've already established you started life near Wolverhampton in 1967. The first record you bought was the Smurf song by Father Abraham, but thankfully you haven't chosen it as one of your musical influences, so we can breathe easy. Around 1980, your musical taste matured somewhat and you started listening to new wave, post-punk, synth-pop and buying the occasional single. What bands were you into back then?
I loved Adam and the Ants, Human League, Duran Duran for a little while, and lots of those sort of new romantic synth-pop, new wave bands.
One of the bands I think was Fad Gadget, is that right?
Yeah. I think it was King of the Flies that single, but it was on a flexi disc that came with a magazine,
right? And
that caught my imagination, and I got well into him. Nobody else I knew had heard of him.
Okay, well, talking of Fad Gadget, your first influence that you've told me about is indeed Fad Gadget, and this is Ricky's Hand. So, in 1980, you actually start making music yourself by hitting boxes with knitting needles, which, strangely enough, was exactly the same as what I did in 1966 with my friend Michael Charlton. I wasn't hitting him with knitting needles, he was doing the singing, and I was banging on tins. Why did you start making music instead of just consuming it?
I don't know. You listen to stuff and you think, oh, how's that done? And you just experiment, I went down the music thing. I suppose it could have been nuclear physics or something else, but it's probably a bit safer.
Okay, well, in 1981, you bought your first proper instruments. Can you tell us what they were and what you produced with them?
Proper instruments.
Proper, serious instruments.
Yeah, the proper instruments would be the Rolf Harris stylophone.
It was proper back then. I mean, Bowie used it.
And I got a Waddington's Computer Tune, which is a odd little red 2-octave keyboard that you could store about 1 or 2 sequences in.
Yeah.
And then I suppose more proper was I got a Casio VL Tone, which was a monophonic synthesizer and pocket calculator at the same time.
Fantastic. So you could add up your royalties as you went along.
Yeah. That didn't require much calculation, though.
That's true. Okay, well, we move on to your first hero. You've chosen Devo, Freedom of Choice. So why that one?
Well, when you asked me to choose my influences and my heroes, I must admit I was pretty interchangeable which were which, because
right.
they all could have counted. But Freedom of Choice is a record I heard in the early 80s, and it seemed very fresh and different from other stuff, and it had a really strong message and a sort of level of, I suppose, cynicism that I kind of related to in terms of its where it looked at politics, but it was interesting instrumentally as well.
Yeah, and I suppose them wearing flower pots on the heads sort of really was the killer blow. That was the final.
Yeah, there's the icing on the cake.
Yeah. Okay, so this is Devo with Freedom of Choice. So we move on to 1982, and you take a step up equipment-wise with a polyphonic keyboard, namely a Casio MT41 and a K memory rhythm drum machine. What did you do with those?
Just lots of little experiments at home. I wasn't really. I occasionally had a go at playing someone else's stuff. Like I remember having recording a version of Kraftwerk's The Model and Adam and the Ants' song Jolly Roger, just probably because they were quite easy to work out. But most of the time I was just doing little experiments with 2 tape decks, doing sound and sound recording, and by the time you'd done that about 3 or 4 times, the quality was shocking. But it was all you could afford at the time, and you know, I learned quite a lot from that, and you know, about arranging things, doing a drum beat, then putting on a bass line, and then chords and other parts. They were rarely finished songs though. They were sort of ideas, riffs, and that sort of thing.
But things were developing. That's good. Interesting. Right. Well, it's time to hear one of your own songs. It's going to be an exclusive performance tonight for the TBA podcast. Faulty Information. Okay, can you tell us a little bit about the background of the song?
Well, Faulty Information is pretty old now. I came up with this in about 91, 92, and it was actually based on a poem by Adrian Mitchell,
right?
Who's unfortunately no longer with us. But I sent that recording and another one I'd done around his one of his poems called The Liberal Christ, and he was really enthusiastic and said, you know, yeah, use that, you know, yeah. He said maybe we could work together, and I sent him a few more recordings along those lines as well. I did about 6 of his poems to music. Damn, I wish I'd followed that up.
Yeah, one of those regrets. I mean, we're going to talk about your collaborations a bit more later on, but before that, we're going to hear live for the TBA podcast. This is Steve Cook with Faulty Information.
Shaped like a house in the place where your house used to stand. It was a mistake, it was the wrong house. Just a mistake based on faulty information. You get back home, you will find 3 black heaps on the ground. 3 black heaps, shaped just like children. The place where your house used to stand. It was a mistake, they were the wrong people. Just a mistake based on faulty information. 3 children, £51 compensation per child. That makes £153, madam. Would you mind signing this receipt?
Right, in 1983 you joined a band called Rickshaw at Immingham School, Grimsby, helped by the music teacher. Can you tell us a little bit about that episode?
Yeah, it just started off with... they knew I'd got this Casio VL Tone and this other keyboard, and that I was interested in joining a band. And it started off with the usual sort of lineup, lifelong history of people dropping out. Started at school, and eventually it ended up being three of us with synthesizers.
Wow.
and a singer. And when I say synthesizers, I suppose two of us with Casio tones and the one who'd got a bit more money with a proper synthesizer.
Well, I bet that made a right racket.
It was good fun. We only ever had a handful of songs, and we only played a couple of gigs at a sort of school concert, that sort of thing. But, it's a learning experience.
Excellent. In 1986, and on to the University of Essex, you invest in a 4-track Amstrad Studio 100 and some new keyboards. What were the new keyboards you got there?
I got a Casio CT1000P, which is... I don't know whether you'd call that a synthesizer, really. It was pretty limited in what it could do.
I've actually got one in the room here somewhere. We haven't got a picture, never mind.
It might be the same one.
It probably is.
It supposedly had 1,000 combinations to make 1,000 different sounds, but to be honest, it was only really a handful that you could ever use.
Yeah.
And although it did a nice bass sound, and I had a Boss DR110 drum machine, and I also acquired a Yamaha CS01 mono synth, which in a way was my first guitar experiment. I never gigged with it or went out and showed anyone else doing that, but you could actually attach a guitar strap to it,
right,
and rock out.
If you're like me, whenever you get a new keyboard, I don't know, it's probably the same for everybody, they whiz through all the presets to see which, and there's usually half a dozen that are good, there's a couple that are great, and then there's an awful lot that's quite ordinary.
That's right, especially back then, nearly 30 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, the technology then, I mean, it's all right buying old synths and being nostalgic, but when you turn them on, you sometimes think, oh, this is a waste of money. But never mind. Okay, your second influence song, which we're going to listen to now, is Every Force Evolves a Form by Shriekback. What is it about the song that influences you? Is it the rhythms?
That came out in about 1992, and I was already into Shriekback. They just reformed to bring this album out,
right,
and I enjoyed them in the 80s. And this whole album and this song in particular, I love that sort of funky vibe it's got, but at the same time really clever lyrics. A little bit of mystery about their lyrics, but they're really quite amusing. Lots of little sarcastic lines and
I think you can clearly see the influence it has on you, because I think a lot of your music is rhythm based and funky and has got intelligent lyrics, so obviously you aim for that. So I can clearly see the influence there. So, here we have Shriekback with Every Force Evolves a Form. So, we fast forward to 1991. You're living in Aberystwyth, and your songwriting comes on leaps and bounds with the purchase of a sequencer, a Yamaha QY10. I hope everyone's taking notes. And a new keyboard, a Casio CZ1000, which I think we've already mentioned, haven't we?
No, it's similarly named, but the other one was a CT1000. This is a CZ1000. There's one for the train spotters.
Yeah, so you formed a new band at that time. What were they called?
They're called Friendly Fire.
Right.
Because at the time it seemed current, but then ever since it's been quite current, and another band is now around, rather more successful than I am, called Friendly Fires.
Oh, right, yeah, of course.
It was... we formed during the sort of Gulf War, and there were lots of incidents of that sort of thing, and I thought it was an interesting name. It's got lots of meanings, and people come up to you and tell you what it meant, and they tell me, oh, that's what they call uranium, isn't it? And I have no idea.
There's always a good story behind every band name, and
the band was it just lasted less than a year, really, as a band. My sister was in it and doing some backing vocals, and a guy called Grant Moon, who's one of the best guitarists I ever met, and another guy was doing the singing initially, Michael Warrilow.
Right.
And we had a bit of fun. We only played one gig, but we recorded a few songs in our studio, which was my first real experience of a proper recording studio.
There's nothing like being in a studio. The problem is back then, before the sort of home studio was up to a certain level, you have to think, right, 16 track, I'm going for 2 days, it's going to be £150 a day, and you sort of were so worried about making a mistake, and then you get to the mixing, you'd have 45 minutes left to mix, and you'd think, oh well, there's a mistake there, oh well, we'll just fade it out, and it was always a compromise.
We got a good deal though. Alan Cotton, who owned the studio, saw me playing live, and he seemed to really like the stuff. And I think I only paid about him, it's a long time ago now, I suppose, so inflation, but I only paid him about 50 quid and gave him my DR 110 drum machine.
Right. So
and we got a few days out of it, and it was great. I mean, I'd read so much about studios. Obviously, you learn when you go in these things, but I'd read all the magazines, like Electronics and Music Maker and that type of thing. And we did go in very prepared, knowing exactly what we wanted on each track.
I think you had to in those days.
That's right. And he said sometimes many bands had no idea though, but we'd thought a lot of that out. We still learnt a lot. I remember when I went back to mix it was just me and Alan, the studio, and we accidentally wiped some of my sister's backing vocal, and then we had to go and get a bit and loop it on a sampler, and the samplers didn't do much sampling then.
Yeah.
Just to repeat that part.
Wow, technical. Wow, that's crazy. So we've already mentioned briefly about your collaboration with the poet Adrian Mitchell. You seem to make a habit of collaborating, mainly with lyricists and poets. Is there any reason for this, or is this the way it's happened?
I mean, collaboration might be too strong for Adrian Mitchell. I saw his poems in a book,
and you nicked them.
and fully acknowledged it. And I sent them to him, and he was very encouraging, and he wrote to me a few times saying about how he liked the stuff. So, but I write words of my own, but I'm not very prolific. I have a good idea. It comes to me now and again, probably less than once a year, to be honest.
Right.
And then I'll write something. But then I enjoy poetry, and I sometimes see ones in a book, and I think, hey, I could use that. I'll ask. but and I later collaborated with a guy called David Bateman, who lives in Liverpool. A poem really appealed to me in one of his books.
Right.
And I do enjoy that challenge, as long as the words say something I'd like to have said.
Yeah.
That's it. It's not just that they rhyme or they fit. I like a lyric that I can look at that and think, I wish I'd written that.
Yeah, well, quite often poets can articulate a particular thing better than you can, and you read it and you think, yeah, you do wish you'd written that, and to put it to music is quite an interesting process. Right, so we move on to your second hero of the podcast, and it's Curtis Mayfield with Superfly. Now, I like Curtis Mayfield, but I've got to admit, I don't know whether I'm going to upset anyone, but I think his voice is just a little bit sort of whiny and high. I mean, there are so many great soul vocalists out there from the 60s and 70s. And this guy, it's very distinctive, I must admit, but it's not something that maybe a full album would probably do my head in. I don't know. What do you mind his high voice? Or?
No, it's never been a problem for me.
Right.
I can't get those notes myself.
No, neither can I.
So I could admire him for being able to do that.
Yeah.
But it's not just about the voice, it's about the whole package.
Right.
with Curtis Mayfield and how there are a few people like Sly and the Family Stone in that sort of funk soul vibe that I've really been influenced by. And Curtis Mayfield, the lyrics were brilliant and very politically conscious, and he was writing stuff that could even be said to have influenced the civil rights movement, such as People Get Ready.
Yeah.
And then he explored funk, and funk has been a big influence on my music.
Yeah, I mean, Curtis Mayfield was very political. He was involved in all that Wattstax stuff and everything. So here we go. This is your second hero, Curtis Mayfield, with definitely not a high whiny voice, a lovely voice, with Superfly. Okay, on to November 1992, and you move to Hartlepool, and it's at the town's Cosmopolitan Hotel where you play your first ever solo gig. Were you terrified or liberated by appearing alone on stage?
I enjoyed it at the time, although I didn't really follow it up because I was still chasing the sort of illusion of getting a bands together all the time. It was always done as a sort of temporary thing. I can't imagine playing a 22-song solo set anywhere now.
No.
Especially of original material.
Well, I suppose with open mics, you can only... How long's that? 20 minutes?
Open mics depends which one you go to, but
Yeah.
it's typically 3 or 4 songs, sometimes more depending on the format. But no, this was a solo gig, you know, and it was good fun. But I think to be honest, that longer set by someone you've not heard of,
It can be a little bit daunting.
it's
I
a long
suppose.
time.
Right. Okay. Well, talking of your own songs, the second one that we're going to hear from you tonight is Obeying Orders. Can you tell us about that song?
Yeah, I originally recorded that under the name Friendly Fire, which was my band, but
Right.
this was when I continued it as a solo project. It is a song we did in the band. It was inspired by a book I read at university by Stanley Milgram about experiments and obedience to authority, and how what he did is he tested how willing people were to obey immoral orders, and it's a fascinating insight into what, you know, potentially how people will just do as they're told. If someone who perhaps has a white laboratory coat on or looks authoritative tells them to do that.
Right.
And
Okay, I think Peter Gabriel did a song about that particular subject as well. But this is your song, and this is Obeying Orders from 1992, and this is Steve Cook with Obeying Orders.
Press that button. You must obey. The subject is wrong, so he must pay. Obeying orders. Obeying orders. You came to this place of your own free will. Sign the contract, and it binds you still. Obeying orders. Obeying orders. The same old excuse again and again. We're just obeying orders, so we're not to blame. A shot is fired from the top of the wall. The bullets are target.
Right, a lot of your lyrics are political in nature, and it doesn't take a genius to work out that you are somewhat left of centre. What are your political views, and when and why did you adopt them?
I would describe myself as a Marxist. It took a while before I came to call myself that, but I've long held views that you say were left-wing, and because of an anger at injustice and inequality, I wish to address those problems in society and to make society more democratic. In terms of the music, I write about what I feel and what moves me and what motivates me, and I do think about politics a lot, so it's naturally going to be reflected in my subject matter.
Right, okay. There was a fallow period musically in the mid-90s, but things picked up in 1998 with a move to Newcastle. You bought some new gear and started forming bands again. Can you fill us in on that period at Newcastle?
I thought going to the big city, by the standards of where I'd lived before anyway, would lead to more musical opportunities, and I think to a degree that was true. I'd moved up there, got a better job with a bit more money, so I could buy some better gear, a better synthesizer, a sampler, better recording equipment, and I'd set about forming a band. I'd been quite influenced by Curtis Mayfield,
right,
but also the big beat scene at the time, which was borrowing a lot from funk. The band I ended up forming, which was called Reduced,
yes,
which is reduced as in REJUICED.
Hilarious.
Was sort of punk pop really, and there were 3 songwriters in the 5-person lineup.
Right.
We all sort of worked on ideas, but unfortunately it didn't really last very long. It only lasted about 6 months. We played a private party for a relative of somebody in the band.
There's a pattern emerging here of bands lasting 6 months, one gig, and then you bail out.
I think sometimes. I mean, when I was back at university, it was more circumstances like people leaving university and things that sort of led to the band's finishing. But it has been a source of frustration, because certainly then I tried with the drummer from that band. We tried to start a new one, and exactly the same type of thing happened. It only lasted about 6 months. Really quite exciting for a while. Really a lot of belief in the material, but I guess not everyone else shared that. And I think people in bands have different lifestyles, different hours they can spare to music, also different ambitions.
I mean, I was thinking about ambition in your case. Has there been at any stage over all these years where you thought, I want to be a professional musician, I want this band to make it, I think we've got a chance, or has it never really got to that level?
I think that's a feeling that's come and gone and come back again and gone again a few times. And I think, I've been involved in bands and thought, maybe this could go somewhere. Certainly in Newcastle, I thought some of the material we were doing, I'm not just talking about things I wrote, but things other people in the band wrote as well, maybe could have got us somewhere commercially. But it wasn't to be. And I didn't sort of bail out and quit my job and move to London and all that sort of, and take those risks that perhaps people need to take that sort of risk.
I think most of them do. When you look back and read through the biographies of bands, that they do live and breathe the band at an early stage. And I must admit, it's a commitment sometimes. I mean, I left a perfectly paid job in 1978 to go on tour, and I thought that was it. My parents went insane. And 6 weeks later, the tour fell to pieces. We were stuck in Manchester with a £600 hotel bill and a broken down transit and no job. But that's another story. Okay, we're on to your final influence. And this is Luke Haynes, which is also known as Baader Meinhof, and it's called Mogadishu. Right, back in Teesside in 2001, and life outside music takes precedence for Steve Cook. What was it that distracted you in the early noughties?
I think I got involved both in my work and job, but also in politics. And I wouldn't say politics is a distraction, but I think particularly with the work, I had a lot of pressures, and it sort of clouded my mind. And I think in my own life, I know when I've left work and don't think about work, I'm a happier person. And in that time, it sort of crowded my mind too much, and I didn't feel at all creative. It was like a creative depression, really.
I can understand that. And of course, there was family life, which obviously takes precedence at certain periods if you've got a growing family and all that kind of thing. You bought a lot of expensive gear around this time, but you didn't make full use of them, you say. Is that right?
Yeah, I think I was not coming up with new ideas, really, or they never got past a little riff. I moved from chasing the dream of getting the band together that would make everything happen, and it became buy the gear that everything would happen. And I didn't. I had an okay job and not enough prudence to save my money, so I ended up buying the next synth and the next drum machine and the next sampler, but often I wasn't motivated to really get to grips with them, to learn how to use them. There wasn't a project happening, there wasn't a band, there wasn't anything, and you didn't see an end in sight for it, sort of something that you'd achieve,
something to focus on.
So it became a bit aimless, and you'd end up selling something and then buy another piece of gear as if the next one would do the magic trick, and of course it doesn't, because actually it's more about your state of mind.
Well, that's true, yeah. I mean, if you've got a song in you, if you've just got a simple piano or an acoustic guitar, you can bang the song out, and if you've got £1 million synthesizer and you haven't got any ideas, then you've got £1 million synthesizer and no ideas. So I understand that. Unexpectedly, in 2005, you got back briefly into being a member of a band called Lick. Tell us how that happened.
Yeah, it was I saw an advert at the music shop when I was spending too much money again about a thing called the Weekend Warriors, where they would get people who used to be in bands and wanted to get back into it, or perhaps people who'd never tried it before, and the music shop staff put people together in bands, and they were going to play a concert at the Arc Art Centre in Stockton, and I got involved in one of those. It was fun but frustrating. There were different levels of abilities, and it was interesting, and I got on well with people. And when we came up to the gig, it was nice that we were the only one of the 4 bands that did anything original. Did one of my songs. I think the fact that it only had 3 chords in it may have helped persuade people to play it.
Sounds like a good song.
I didn't feel like staying with the band. I think some of the bands tried to stay on. I don't know how many did in the end, but I didn't really want to play covers. It's never been just about my songs, but I like to do something original, whether it's mine or whoever's in the band.
Right, okay, we're on to your final hero, and this time it's something I really like. I love The Clash, and obviously you do as well, and this is one of their best. This is Rock the Casbah. Right, we're getting very much to the present day now. In 2009, you started taking Facebook seriously and realising its potential. Alongside SoundCloud, you were given a new lease of life, creatively speaking. Did social networking allow you to rediscover your muse?
I think it did. It's a lot of people knock it and say it isn't social. It's just people talking on computers rather than talking to each other. But actually, no, you are talking to other people, and I sort of be in conversation and networking with people, musicians and songwriters, and people all over the world, as well as, of course, people involved in politics throughout the world. And I sneaked a track or two onto Facebook and got some really enthusiastic responses from people. Then I remember a friend I'd never met him in real life still, actually, a guy called Martin Bell, was on SoundCloud. Saw that, that looks a good site, and I tried SoundCloud. And it was just at the time when it was sort of taking off, so I joined it at the right time and put some tracks, really old stuff I'd recorded back in 92 or in the late 90s, and put those tracks on. I was getting some great responses, and I was learning a lot as well just by listening to other people's stuff. And what you do is, it depends how you want to use it, but I sometimes, do constructive critiques and receive constructive critiques from other people of what you're doing. And I remember the thing that really sort of made me think, heck, I've got to get back into doing this music properly, was when I got a message from Africa Bambaataa.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. You had a message from the legendary hip-hop pioneer, Africa Bambaataa. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Well, yeah, at first I thought it was just a joke or somebody using his name. And then I could see on SoundCloud that the message had been sent from the Ukraine, of all places.
Wow.
Africa Bambaataa he'd be in New York, not Ukraine.
Yeah.
Then I looked on the web, and he was on tour there.
Right.
So it was, and then I got another one from him. And what he was saying, he really enjoyed my stuff, and he was talking about things I'd recorded over a decade before.
Wow.
And saying it was really funky, and I'm going to play it on my radio show. And I thought, yeah, I've got to get back into this. That's nice, Yeah, and it's nice to have a little bit of ego flattery sometimes.
Oh, goodness me, yeah. I would have that on the top of my website. That is.
Yeah. So I thought, yeah, I've got to get gigging and get this stuff out here, not just do the music from a studio bedroom, but get and play some gigs again. Take it seriously this time. Seriously but fun,
Yeah, that's fine. Well, August 2010, a singer-songwriters night at the Billingham Synthonia Club and the debut of a new song, Scorpion Farm. All in all, an important gig for you, right?
Well, yeah, it was a first solo gig in over a decade, and it was just getting out there. I knew I wanted to do that, and fortunately nothing that happened put me off, right. And it went really well. It was only playing 4 or 5 songs, but some old ones that I'd had for years, and a couple of newies, and it went really well, and I really got the taste for these, and I was actively seeking out open mics after that just to get the experience, because I'd only gigged occasionally.
Well, I mean, I noticed you on Facebook gigging it, virtually every other night. I can't believe it. How you've got the stamina to do this, and
Yeah, I'm possibly gone past that phase now, but I did think, you've only played a handful of gigs over 2 decades. There's a lot of ground to make up there,
right.
And I wanted to get out there and I suppose learn a bit of stagecraft and how to put myself across. It became a little bit of an addiction for a while.
Yeah.
And now I'm a bit more selective probably, and I like to go to occasional open mic. I went to one only a couple of days ago. But also you've got to still take time at home to write and also have the rest of your life.
I noticed I must admit I've seen the little clip of the other night, and you went into the audience with your guitar, and did you get other people to play in the audience?
Yes, yeah. Since I adopted a guitar, which I wasn't doing when I did that first gig that we mentioned, but it's become a little bit of a gimmick that I do, is during a song or in the set I take people by surprise if they haven't seen me before,
right?
And because I use a wireless system,
right?
So there's no cables to worry about. I go into the audience and invite a couple of people to play on my strap-on organ, missus.
Sounds a bit rude.
That usually goes down very well, and it's a good bit of fun.
Because I noticed it was playing away, and then all of a sudden it really started to sound better, and I thought, I wonder what that was.
Yes, when I pick a random stranger to have a go on, it's kind of quite fun. Sometimes obviously you go up to people and go, oh no, I don't want to touch that, and then other people will have a go, and some people have never touched a keyboard before, and some people you think, heck, they're better than I am.
Yeah.
So
you got to be careful.
They're not getting another go.
Yeah,
but it's also, I think one of the things about when you play keyboards though, and you use sequencers and program stuff, it is important. It is also helpful in actually showing, yes, I am actually playing this. So you can go up to someone and they'll play something random notes, and he isn't just miming.
Yeah, it's proper stuff, genuine stuff. Right, we've got the third song of your own for the podcast, and this is, we've discussed this, I think, Scorpion Farm.
Yeah.
It's not the job he wanted, but he says he doesn't mind. He'd rather work on motors, but he took what he could find. Happy just to have a part, happy in his role. He says the pay is crappy, but it's better than the dole. Daddy's got a job, Daddy's got a job at last, down at the Scorpion Farm. Daddy's got a job, Daddy's got a job at last, down at the Scorpion Farm. You have to be realistic, 'cause this isn't paradise. And anyway, statistics show that scorpions are nice. Happy just to have a task, happy with his prize. Filling up the poison flask and hoping for a rise. Daddy's got a job, the sting. He's making sure the breeding pairs get on with their own thing. He's shining up the segments, he's cleaning up the claws, he's marketing the poison to all the usual stores. Daddy's got a job. Daddy's got a job at last down at the Scorpion Farm. Daddy's got a job. Daddy's got a job at last down at the Scorpion Farm. Daddy's got a job. Daddy's got a job at last down at the Scorpion Farm. Daddy's got a job. Yes, he's got a job at last.
So, with the encouragement received through interaction and collaboration, most of it fueled by social media, the new songs come thick and fast. Do you have plans for an album, or do you just prefer releasing songs as and when they're ready?
So far, I've taken the latter approach of just bunging stuff on SoundCloud and or playing it at gigs as and when I write things. I'm wondering whether I should try and put together a CD sometime. Although even that, of course, it is a dying format, the album.
Well, I'm a little bit, I'd like to fight against that, to be honest, because I don't like downloads. I don't like MP3s. I like the physical product. And like the Bowie album is coming out in a couple of weeks, and I've ordered the vinyl and the CD. I wouldn't dream of going to iTunes and downloading it, because I just think that's nonsense. I mean, maybe it's me and my age, but there you go.
Actually, but I'm the same, actually.
You know,
if I want to buy, if I want to get an album, I actually prefer to buy the physical product, the CD, than just to download it. I mean, when I've got the album, I will then make MP3s out of it. But I do like to actually own the album at the moment, and I still haven't changed from that myself.
Yeah.
And you don't feel like you fully own it.
Well, exactly.
With MP3. But on the other hand, it's could be quite an investment if I to put together a CD. But of course, it's far less expensive than it used to be. So maybe you ought to get my act together a bit on that and do something.
Well, I would have thought with your particularly with your political stances and the way that you put that into your lyrics, that doing an album, I wouldn't say a concept album, but doing an album that maybe has a beginning, a middle and an end, and says something in a bit of a broader context about the way you feel. Has that appealed to you at all? Yeah,
it does. Although, of course, there's that scary second album prospect after that. And then that's maybe I'm frightened of the second album more than the first.
Well, you want to get the first one out of the way first, then worry about the second. You wouldn't get anywhere, would you? Right. Anyone watching you live would notice right away that you have a keytar. Mm-hmm. We've discussed this before, strapped to you like a guitar. Can you tell us how many you own and why you decided to use one for a live performance rather than a normal keyboard?
Well, when I first came back to gigging 2.5 years ago, I was just standing on stage behind a big synthesizer workstation,
right.
And I felt I was at a disadvantage compared to some of the other musicians, most usually guitarists, in terms of movement on stage and sort of the relationship the rapport you can build with an audience. And I had to think around that because I don't play guitar and I'm too lazy to learn.
Yeah.
So I thought, guitar, I'll try it, and I bought something that was just a little controller at first and used a Behringer a MIDI controller, and would use that for a couple of songs in a set, and then they seemed to go really well. I thought, I've got to buy a proper one of these, so I bought a Roland Lucina shoulder synth, they call it, but it's really a guitar.
Yes.
And gradually it became the main instrument I would play. I think they're really good for a keyboard player because people can actually see what you're playing. Because when you're doing synthesized stuff using sequences and samplers and such like, sometimes audiences don't know what you're doing and what's been done already and what you've programmed. And with a guitar, they can actually see, like with your fingers, your hands, playing what they're hearing, and they can. There's actually a more direct relationship between what they see and what they hear, and it's quite good. Whether sometimes when you get guitarists, especially as quite often I do sounds that quite like a distorted guitar, and people can be watching that with fascination sometimes in the audience.
Oh, well, that's interesting.
And that's good. But how many do I own, you asked? And,
well, that was just a
I actually
celebrity question.
Yeah, I've got 3 now. Yeah, I had 2 Rolands and a new one by Alesis.
Is there a magazine called Guitar Monthly, or is it,
There should be.
Yeah, maybe you should start one. Okay, where do you want to be musically in 12 months' time? Plans for the future? Or just more of the same?
I think I've never been that great at planning, so I don't know. But I think I just sort of see what happens, and I try to improve each time I make a recording, each time I do a gig, try to do it better than the last time. Trying to get better gigs, more interesting venues. I think I would like to play a bit further afield. I was playing in Teesside mainly first because I lived there. Since then I've had a few gigs in Newcastle and Yorkshire.
Yeah.
As long as I can still afford to do it, I'd like to sort of play some more interesting different places.
Okay, you ready to hear first? Steve Cook is an existential Marxist, so that's interesting.
Was that a question?
No, I was just saying, I thought you were going to say, I'm not a fucking existential Marxist, you cunt.
This one's another song I wrote based on an Adrian Mitchell poem called The Liberal Christ Gives an Interview.
And I ripped my way. The very first leper I cured. Gonna shave my beard, cut my hair, buy myself some bulletproof underwear. I would have preached a golden sermon, but I didn't like the look of the mounds. I would have fed the 50,000, but the press weren't there to count. Gonna shave my beard, cut my hair, buy myself some bulletproof underwear. I'm the liberal Christ, I've got no blood to spare. I'm the liberal Christ, and I've got no blood to spare. The businessmen in the temple had a team of coppers on the door. And if I'd spent a year in the desert, I'd have lost my pension then for sure. Gonna shave my beard, cut my hair, buy myself some bulletproof underwear. I'm the liberal Christ, I've got no blood to spare. I'm the liberal Christ, and I've got no blood to spare. Into wine, but they weren't giving licenses, and I would have died and been crucified, like you know how it is. Gonna shave my beard, cut my hair by myself. Bulletproof underwear, I'm the liberal Christ. Got the blood to spare, I'm the liberal Christ. And I've got no blood to spare. Liberal Christ, I've got no blood to spare. I'm the liberal Christ, and I've got no blood to spare.
This next song is called Murtad. That's an Arabic word meaning someone who turns against their religion. I wrote this over 20 years ago, but don't worry, that's the only word in Arabic.
Is hiding, lest he should end up dead. There's a fundamentalist cleric put a price upon his head. Thought he got freedom to criticize the creed. The mullahs couldn't stand this, they knew where it would lead. Murtad, he who goes against the faith. Murtad, now knows what he must face. Murtad, whom believers have to waste. Murtad, I hear they're burning books now in the streets today. Russia is the devil, they say that he must pay. Got to show the faith strong, solid as a rock. Stand up for the prophet, who we're not allowed to knock. Murtad, he who goes against the faith. Murtad, now knows what he must face. Murtad, whom believers have to waste. Murtad, go up in bookshops, politicians stall. Dissenters killed in Belgium, the dead defy the call. Stinky's found his niche now, spotting blasphemy. I'll better mind what I say. Oh, they're coming after me. Murtad, he who goes against the faith. Murtad, now knows what he must face. Murtad, whom believers have to waste. Murtad.
It seems to me that Islamic fundamentalists could do with a little criticism right now.
Yeah, I'm gonna have a wee, and then if you can set up.